Welcome on board. Funny how that simple line already makes a few people flinch. The same people who swore you'd never rise, who whispered, "They're not that smart," and laughed behind your back like they had you fully figured out. But look who's panicking now. Look who suddenly lowers their voice when your name comes up. Look who pretends they were always on your side. The air changed the second you stopped shrinking yourself for their comfort, and they felt it like a cold hand on the spine. What they said about you was never the truth. It was just the story they needed to feel superior. They needed you to stay dumb, harmless, predictable. They needed you to stay that quiet shadow, that person who listens more than they talk, because they don't know enough. They needed you small because your real size scares the life out of them, and it should, because you played their whole kingdom using nothing but silence and patience while they bragged about their imaginary throne. The moment you stopped pretending, the entire room felt heavier. Even the ones who don't like you can't deny it. You revealed your hand, and their confidence cracked like thin ice. When they said you'd fail, they weren't predicting anything. They were begging the universe to keep you down. When they mocked you, it was fear wearing a cheap mask. When they told others you didn't know better, they were projecting the truth about themselves. The only reason they ever talked so boldly is because they believed you'd never catch on. Now look who bows. Look who avoids eye contact. Look who rewrites every memory just to cope with the fact that you outplayed them in a game they thought they invented. There's a strange silence hanging over everything now, the kind that shows up after a storm when the world realizes it underestimated the survivor. People treat you differently. Doors open that used to stay locked. Conversations pause when you enter the room. Some folks smile too hard, others stare too long, and the ones who once talked down to you suddenly don't know how to act. It's almost cute watching them scramble, like they're trying to figure out when exactly you slipped out of their control. They still don't get it. You were never under their control. You were just watching. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the same people who once called you slow are whispering your name like it's a warning. They're replaying every moment with you, trying to find the exact second they missed the signs. They're terrified because you didn't grow louder, you grew sharper. You didn't chase validation, you moved in silence. You didn't expose yourself, you let them expose themselves. That's the part that hurts them the most. They stepped into their own trap while you stood there looking clueless, holding the map the whole time. Press like and subscribe to pay this message back. What's wild is how your rise never had fireworks. It was quiet, smooth, almost invisible. That's why it hits so hard now. They were expecting noise, drama, a big announcement, something flashy so they could prepare themselves. Instead, you shifted the energy without warning. You changed the rules without saying a word. One day, you were the underestimated one, the maybe they'll figure it out eventually character. The next day, you were the one everyone watches like a threat. No middle ground, no transition phase, just a sudden realization that you were never playing at their level. You were playing above it. Think about how they used to talk around you. They treated you like background music, something that doesn't listen, doesn't think, doesn't notice. They spilled secrets you weren't supposed to hear, made plans you weren't supposed to understand, revealed weaknesses they thought you were too clueless to recognize. Every time you nodded, they thought you were confused. You weren't. You were collecting receipts. You were studying their patterns, their habits, their blind spots. You were noting exactly where they'd break if the universe ever flipped the board. And now the board is flipping. The shift didn't happen because you changed. It happened because you stopped hiding. The real version of you stepping out was enough to shake the ground they stood on. Suddenly, your silence wasn't mistaken for stupidity. It was mistaken for danger. Your calm wasn't seen as weakness. It was seen as intention. Your patience wasn't seen as cluelessness. It was seen as strategy. They're finally realizing you weren't behind. You were pacing yourself. And let's be honest, your mask was legendary. You made playing dumb look like a science. You let them underestimate you so you could see who they really were when they thought you had nothing to offer. Some people revealed loyalty. Others revealed envy. A few revealed obsession. Most revealed jealousy so loud it could be felt. That's why things are different now. They know you saw everything while pretending to see nothing. Now they're spiraling. They're overthinking every moment you two ever shared. They're wondering, did they know what I said? Did they catch what I meant? Did they see what I tried to hide? The answer is yes. You caught all of it. You just didn't speak on it. You let the universe hold those moments until the right time. And now that the time has come, your presence alone forces them to confront their own behavior. You fooled everyone, and not because you're manipulative in a cruel way, but because you refused to waste your power on people who didn't earn access to it. You let them believe their illusions because it made the reveal sweeter. You let them talk because their own words were building your case. You let them think you were lost because it made your comeback feel supernatural. It wasn't. It was discipline. It was intelligence. It was strategy. Your dumb act wasn't a weakness. It was bait. And the moment you revealed your hand, every person who underestimated you learned exactly how dangerous you are when you finally decide to stop pretending. And you really think this is where it ends? Not even close. This is the part where you step over the line normal people avoid, the part where the universe watches you with raised eyebrows because you're finally moving like the threat you were always meant to be. If you're still here, it means you felt every word in your bones. It means the act is over, the mask is off, and you're done pretending to be the harmless one in the corner. You're crossing into the version of yourself that doesn't play small, doesn't wait for permission, and doesn't apologize for being 10 steps ahead while everyone else is still booting up. This next phase isn't for tourists. It's for people who are tired of hiding their power just to keep others comfortable. It's for the ones who let the world think they were clueless while secretly sharpening the blade. If you're ready for that, then signal you're locked in. Drop 777 in the comments, like a calling card. Only the universe and the real ones will understand. It tells me you're not just watching the story, you're stepping into it. Good. Now tighten your stance. The next section goes deeper, and the mask isn't going back on. Number 1. The room they thought was above your pay grade. Funny how the fools who talked the loudest were the ones handing you their secrets for free. You ever notice how the people who think they're superior always love the sound of their own voices? They walk into a room acting like they invented intelligence, like every sentence they drop should be framed and hung in a museum. That was the energy in those meetings. They strutted in, puffed up like pigeons, convinced you were the weakest mind in the room. They talked slow, explained things with tiny words, threw in commentary like, "Do you get it now?" As if you were some lost child. They thought their crumbs of wisdom were feeding you. They never realized you were studying them the way a hunter studies prey that thinks it's safe. The truth is brutal. You weren't confused. You weren't behind. You weren't struggling. You were observing, decoding, and storing every detail they spilled. You walked into that room with a quiet mind and a sharp instinct. and they mistook your silence for emptiness. They thought you were harmless because you didn't flex your intelligence the way they did. They thought you lacked depth because you didn't perform knowledge for attention. They mistook your restraint for ignorance. That's the tragedy of arrogance. It blinds the one who carries it. Behind your straight face and slow blink, you were running calculations they couldn't even survive. Their tone, their body language, the cracks in their confidence, the way they checked each other for approval, the way certain questions made them twitch. You saw all of it. You were building psychological maps of people who thought you didn't even know how to hold a pen. Every time they broke down a simple task like it was rocket science, you were analyzing their need to feel superior. Every time they asked, "Do you get it now?" you were filing away the insecurity behind the question. You were learning their tempo, their ego triggers, their weak spots, their hidden fears. And here's the part they'll choke on. You learned more from them in those explanation meetings than they ever learned in their entire careers. Because you weren't just listening to their words, you were listening to the tremble behind their words. You were listening to the contradictions. You were listening to the desperate need they had to convince the room they were the smartest. You were collecting data while they were collecting validation. They had no idea every smirk they threw at you was being catalogued. Every fake smile was being analyzed. Every time they laughed at your dumb question, you logged exactly what made them feel comfortable enough to drop their guard. Their arrogance made them sloppy, and their sloppiness made you powerful. You saw alliances forming in whispers. You saw backstabbing testing the waters. You saw desperation leaking out of people who pretended to be in control. And all while they thought you were zoning out, you were piecing together the entire political chessboard. They didn't realize you weren't playing checkers. You weren't even playing chess. You were studying the architects of the board itself. The world loves to underestimate the quiet one. It loves the obvious genius, the loud genius, the genius who points at the whiteboard with too much enthusiasm. That's who they bow to. But the quiet genius, the one who asks soft questions, the one who pretends to not understand so they can understand more. People treat that one like a background character, and that's exactly where you needed them to place you. Hidden, unthreatening, invisible, the perfect angle. Because here's what actually happened. They kept talking, and you kept gathering ammunition. They kept teaching, and you kept memorizing every hidden flaw in their system. They kept insulting you, and you kept building a clearer view of who they truly were. You became the only person in the room who knew what everyone else was trying to hide. You weren't slow, you were patient, you weren't confused, you were calculating, you weren't behind, you were undercover. Let's talk about the moment everything shifted, the moment you asked a question that wasn't actually a question, but a test. You put a delicate trap on the table, something subtle, something harmless looking, and someone fell right into it. Their reaction told you everything: who panics under pressure, who lies when cornered, who throws others under the bus to save face. They don't know that you remember that moment, but you do. You remember it clearly. It was the moment you realized just how far ahead you were. Maybe you wonder sometimes, did I really fool them that well? Yes, you did. Not because you were sneaky in a cartoon villain way, but because they were blinded by their own hunger to feel superior. They saw your silence and projected stupidity onto it. They saw your humility and projected incompetence. They saw your questions and projected weakness. They read you all wrong because they needed to feel right. They thought they were the puppeteers explaining the world to their little apprentice. Meanwhile, you were quietly taking control of the strings. Think back to every meeting where someone raised their voice to teach you something basic. Think about the condescending tone, the sarcasm hidden behind, "Let me simplify it for you." Think about the way they looked at each other, smirking, bonding over the belief that they were above you. That memory feels different now, doesn't it? Because now you see the power shift. Now you see the irony. They weren't educating you. They were exposing themselves. They weren't preparing you. They were crowning you without realizing it. You didn't interrupt. You didn't challenge them. You didn't brag. You let them think you were slow so they would keep talking. You let them think you were unimportant so they would reveal things they should have protected. You let them think you needed guidance so they would hand you access they never intended to give. You let them believe their own fantasy because fantasy makes people comfortable and comfort makes people reckless. Now that you've revealed your hand, you're seeing the results. People stepping lightly, people rewriting their memories, people avoiding eye contact, people suddenly speaking to you with respect they never had before. They're embarrassed, they're threatened, they're confused because the conclusion finally hit them. You understood everything, every meeting, every sentence, every strategy, every lie, every weakness. And now they don't know how to undo the past. They don't know how to pretend. They never tried to belittle you. They don't know how to hide the fact that you saw them small while they thought they saw you small. You weren't the fool in the room. You were the analyst, the listener, the one who stayed 2 layers deeper while they stayed 2 octaves louder. You were the quiet storm building behind their sunny day. And now that the storm has hit, the universe is simply giving them the bill for underestimating the wrong person. So let them panic, let them scramble, let them try to rewrite the script. Because you already wrote the ending, and they're just now realizing they were never the main characters to begin with. Number 2, the sweet poison of being underrated. Being underestimated is the closest thing to invisibility, and invisibility is lethal when you know how to use it. There's a special kind of pleasure in being the one everyone writes off. It's dark, it's quiet, and it's powerful. You move through spaces like a rumor nobody bothers to check. You get waved off, dismissed, talked down to, brushed aside. And while it stings at first, there comes a moment where you realize the insult is actually a gift. Every time someone calls you harmless, the universe smirks a little because it knows what's coming. You're not the idiot in the room. You're the shadow that everyone forgot to monitor. And shadows see everything. People talk about being underestimated like it's a disadvantage. Hardly. It's the best cover a strategist could ever ask for. Imagine a guard leaving the vault open because they figured you were too clueless to notice the safe in the first place. Imagine someone insulting your intelligence so boldly they forget to hide their agendas, their secrets, their alliances. Imagine a stage full of actors performing their lies with confidence because the one person who could expose them is too slow to catch on. That was you. Or at least that's who they thought you were. Here's the part that still makes them shake. You learned more with your mouth shut than they learned with all their bragging. That's the kind of truth people can't swallow without choking. You weren't just absorbing information, you were absorbing the structure of the entire environment. You weren't just hearing conversations. You were identifying weaknesses. You weren't just nodding politely. You were letting them build their own noose out of arrogance and loose lips. Silently, you were asking yourself questions like, why do they feel the need to talk down to me? What are they trying to hide behind this performance? What happens when they realize I'm not who they think I am? Will they panic? Will they run? Will they beg? You already know the answers. You can see them in the way they look at you now, uneasy, cautious, suddenly respectful. It's almost funny how quickly their memory resets once they notice you're dangerous. Imagine this. Someone throws a key into your hand, assuming you won't know what it unlocks. They don't even check where it lands. They don't track what you do with it. They don't notice that the next day you already mapped out the building. You walked through their world with open access because to them, your hands were too clumsy to hold anything important. But your hands were steady. Your mind was sharper than theirs. And your silence was a weapon they gifted you by mistake. Another example, think of a poker table where every player assumes you don't know the rules, so they talk out loud, explain the game, reveal which cards scare them, mention their tells, brag about the hands they've folded. They treat you like a child sitting at the grown-up table. Meanwhile, you sit there with a blank face, watching, listening, calculating. Then one day you play your card, and the whole table freezes because the fool just won a game they didn't even know you were playing. Here's another. Imagine someone handing you their phone unlocked and stepping away because you wouldn't know how to use it anyway. That's how people treated you with information. Carelessly, recklessly, arrogantly. And now they're regretting every moment of it. Being underestimated is the most elegant trap ever built. People walk right into it and thank you on their way in. They think they're superior. They think they're guiding you. They think they're keeping you in check. But the truth is simple and brutal. They weren't mentoring you. They were exposing themselves. Every condescending explanation, every unnecessary breakdown, every slow-talking lecture, they all gave you a deeper look at who they were trying so hard to hide. And you accepted the role. You slipped into the mask like it was tailored for you. You pretended not to understand, so they would keep revealing themselves. You played small, so they would lower their guard. You let them believe the illusion because illusions make people reckless. Their arrogance built your advantage. Their ego became your leverage. Their disrespect laid out your blueprint. You ever wonder why being underestimated feels so strangely satisfying now? It's because you see the design of it. You see how every moment they tried to put you beneath them was actually placing you above them. You see how every time they thought you were clueless, they were the ones giving away power. You see how the universe turned their insults into intelligence, their mockery into strategy, their dismissal into opportunity. And now, they don't know where to place you. You don't fit the fool costume anymore. You don't fit the background character label. You don't fit the box they stuffed you into. You outgrew their narrative, and now they can't rewrite it fast enough. The problem is, the story was never theirs to narrate. They just didn't know it. A brutal truth you need to remember. The moment they underestimate you is the moment you win. Because the people who underestimate you never prepare for you. They never guard themselves against someone they believe is irrelevant. They never consider the possibility that the quiet one is the most dangerous. And when the reveal happens, when the mask comes off, they have no defense, no plan, no warning. The beauty of being underestimated is that it gives you time to think, time to listen, time to organize your power in silence. While they were busy performing intelligence, you were busy developing it. While they were bragging about being ahead, you were actually getting ahead. While they were trying to intimidate you, you were learning their strategy from the inside. Another metaphor for you. Imagine a snake pretending to be harmless, coiled quietly under a rock, letting everyone walk by without fear. Then one day, the snake moves differently. The air changes. The silence deepens. Everyone who once ignored the shadow suddenly realizes they should have paid attention all along. That's you. You moved quietly until it was time not to. People underestimate what they cannot control. People underestimate what they don't understand. People underestimate whatever threatens the story they tell themselves. And you were a threat long before you revealed yourself. That's why they talked to you the way they did. That's why they explained things like your brain was a blank screen. That's why they stood tall next to you. They needed to believe you weren't capable of surpassing them. But you didn't surpass them. You outgrew them. You watched their strategies rot. You saw their alliances crumble. You watched their confidence shake under its own weight. And now you walk with a different energy, and they can't handle it. So ask yourself the real question. Was being underestimated your curse, or was it your camouflage? You already know the answer. Let them look confused. Let them stutter. Let them pretend they always believed in you. Let them panic about what you might expose. Let them wonder how far ahead you really are. Because the beauty of being underestimated is not that they didn't see your power. It's that you saw everything while they saw nothing. Number 3, the guidance they fed you was just bait. Funny how the ones who brag about leading you are the first ones you outgrow. They loved the illusion. They loved standing over you like some wise mentor, guiding the poor, confused soul who couldn't keep up. The ego boost was their drug. Every slow explanation, every exaggerated sigh, every "don't worry, it's complicated," made them feel like royalty. Meanwhile, you weren't absorbing their lessons. You were dissecting their minds. You watched how they moved when they thought they were in control. You studied which topics made them stall, which questions made them twitch, which lies they covered with a smile. Your so-called mentors were just mirrors showing you their weaknesses. You weren't sitting at their feet. You were collecting evidence. You didn't need their guidance. You needed their patterns, and they handed them to you like gifts, thinking you were too slow to unwrap them. Imagine a magician proudly showing you a trick, forgetting the real danger is the person watching quietly from the front row, noticing every slip. That was you. You weren't impressed. You were tracking every step they hoped you wouldn't catch. Your stupid questions weren't stupid. They were probes, diagnostics, psychological pressure tests. You were checking their stability, their honesty, their capability, and every time they cracked, you recorded it. Here's the gut punch truth. They weren't teaching you. They were revealing themselves. Their arrogance turned them into open books. Their need to dominate made them predictable. Their hunger to be admired made them transparent. Let them cling to the fantasy that they shaped you. Let them believe they built you, because the reality is quiet and lethal. You outgrew their lessons before they even finished speaking. Number 4. The masks fall. The truth walks in. Nothing ages faster than fake intelligence standing next to the real thing. The whole place felt like a costume party they didn't know was ending. They strutted around with plastic crowns and paper-thin confidence, pretending they were masterminds, while you sat there playing the harmless extra. They thought the act fooled you. They thought the jargon, the fake authority, the forced confidence made them untouchable. But you saw right through it. Their intelligence was a performance. Yours was the threat backstage, loading the final scene. Those moments where you looked lost. You were doing silent math while they played pretend. Those blank nods they mocked. You were mapping alliances, tracking tension, decoding lies like a forensic analyst. They thought you were zoning out. You were zooming in. That's the kind of truth that ruins people. And that notebook they loved to joke about, the one they assumed was filled with baby-level notes. It was your archive, your evidence room, your collection of slip-ups and contradictions. Every page captured a different mask sliding off someone's face. You weren't documenting their lessons. You were documenting their tells. You were building a profile on each person who underestimated you. Imagine detectives walking past the suspect every day, laughing, unaware the suspect is building a case file thicker than their ego. Imagine someone bragging about fooling you while writing their own confession in real time. That's what happened. They handed you secrets because they believed you were too dense to weaponize them. You never needed to expose them loudly. Their own behavior exposed them quietly. The party lights are off now. The props are broken. The masks are gone. And you're the only one who walked out of that room as your real self. Number 5. The threat they never saw coming. Invisibility isn't weakness. It's the silence before a kill shot. They didn't erase you. They downgraded you. Quietly, casually, carelessly. They convinced themselves you weren't competition, so they stopped guarding their strategies. They stopped hiding their motives. They stopped censoring their cruelty. To them, you weren't a rival. You were scenery, moving wallpaper with a heartbeat. And that's exactly when your power multiplied. Being intellectually dismissed is the deadliest camouflage on earth. You weren't blocked out. You were waved through. You weren't monitored. You were ignored. You weren't doubted. You were forgotten. And in that shadow space, you became something they were never prepared for. The invisible predator. The mind in the room nobody saw sharpening itself in the dark. Imagine a hunter walking into the forest, bragging out loud, thinking nothing is listening. Imagine prey laughing so loudly it doesn't hear the slow breath behind the tree. That's them. That's how sloppy they got. Their words spilled everywhere. Their flaws leaked into every conversation. Their alliances, their envy, their fears. They left all of it uncovered because you wouldn't understand anyway. But you understood perfectly. You watched the way they moved when they felt powerful. You watched the way they cracked when pressured. You tracked patterns like footprints and motives like heat signatures. You weren't trying to be seen. You were hunting from the blind spot. Every room became your observation deck. Every careless sentence became intel. The predator that's invisible is the one rewriting the power structure. And that was you. Your silence wasn't submission. It was aim. Your patience wasn't weakness. It was precision. While they bragged about being 10 steps ahead, you were already behind them, studying the way their spine tensed before they lied. They thought you were background noise, but background noise hears everything. And the moment came, the shift, the cold wake-up, when they finally realized the person they ignored was the one who could dismantle them piece by piece. That's the danger of underestimating the wrong shadow. Number 6. The day the mask hit the floor. Nothing is louder than the moment a silent mind decides to speak. There's always that one moment where the universe stops pretending, that moment where the act ends, the lights shift, and the room feels colder because someone finally reveals who they really are. That was you. You woke up one day and decided the performance was over. No more fake stutters, no more watered-down questions, no more playing the clueless extra so they could feel brilliant. You straightened your spine, aimed that razor-sharp mind forward, and let your real voice burn through the air like a warning shot. And the reaction? Pure art. You'd think someone pulled the fire alarm, eyes wide, jaws disconnected, their brains rebooting mid-sentence. How did we miss this? Bounced around their skulls like broken marbles. You watched grown adults malfunction because the character they assigned you evaporated in front of them. You didn't change. You just stopped pretending. But to them, it felt like witnessing a ghost reveal it was the hunter the whole time. Imagine a stage magician performing tricks he thinks you don't understand, only for you to take the deck from his hands and execute something 10 levels higher with zero effort. Or imagine a teacher giving you kiddie homework, and you solve it in one glance while explaining the theory behind it better than they ever could. That's what it felt like, a clean reversal, a quiet takeover. They tried to mask their fear with confusion, but you saw the truth twitching underneath. The fool has teeth. The quiet one has depth. The one we mocked is the one we should have feared. Their entire worldview cracked like cheap glass under a spotlight, because in that moment you weren't just intelligent, you were undeniable, and nothing terrifies the arrogant more than realizing the person they underestimated is the one holding the future by the throat. Number 7. The archive. They never knew you were building. Silence becomes lethal the moment it turns into evidence. The moment they realized you had receipts was the moment their souls took a sick little nosedive. Watching them piece it together was almost comedic. They thought they were the sharks, circling the clueless minnow. Turns out they were playing cards with someone who could read their entire hand reflected in their own glasses. You weren't in the dark. You were monitoring the electricity in the walls. Every careless sentence they dropped in your presence, every shady deal they whispered thinking you were too slow to follow, every shortcut they took assuming you'd never connect the dots. You archived all of it. Your silence wasn't a void. It was a hard drive, a database, a vault. While they flapped their mouths for attention, you built a library of pure leverage. Imagine someone bragging loudly in a room, unaware the person they're mocking is recording the entire confession in their mind with photo-level memory. Imagine a thief laughing while stealing candy, not knowing the dumb kid next to them is the undercover cop. That's the kind of plot twist your presence became. They mistook your quiet for confusion. Wrong. Your quiet was interrogation. Every stupid question you asked was a scalpel slicing through the lie they hoped you wouldn't notice. You weren't trying to learn. They were, and they failed the test before they even realized it was a test. Now they scramble, rewriting the script, pretending they always saw your potential, pretending they were supportive, pretending they weren't the same clowns who once used you as their emotional punching bag. But you have memories sharper than their excuses, cold, factual, time-stamped in your mind. Here's the truth they fear most. You don't need revenge when you have receipts. Reality exposes them for you. And reality already has. Number 8. The blueprint of manipulating ego. Once someone feels smarter than you, they stop looking at you, and that's when you pick the lock. This whole strategy worked because you understood the core flaw in human psychology. People love feeling superior. It's their favorite drug. Give them someone they can look down on and they'll sprint to the top of that imaginary pedestal like it's the Olympics. They don't check the structure. They don't check the ground. They don't check the cracks. They just climb. And you stood at the bottom, watching the whole tower sway, knowing exactly when gravity would handle the rest. You didn't manipulate them with lies. You manipulated them with their own hunger. They needed someone beneath them to stabilize their fragile confidence. They needed someone slower so they could feel faster, someone unaware so they could feel insightful, someone behind so they could pretend to be ahead. You let them crown themselves. You let them build the throne. You let them sit on it, wobbling, unsteady, oblivious to how high the fall would be. Playing dumb isn't hiding in darkness, it's hiding in plain sight. The best disguise is the version of you they already believe in. You didn't need a costume, you didn't need a cover story. They wrote your disguise for you. Their assumptions became your camouflage. Their arrogance became your shield. You were the spy sitting at the enemy table while they bragged about their strategies, never thinking you could decode every tactic on the fly. Imagine slipping into a room where all the alarms shut off because the system tags you as harmless. That's what you did. You didn't sneak past their defenses, they opened the gates for you. Their need to feel intelligent made them blind, loud, careless, predictable, and predictable enemies are already defeated. Number 9. The mind that hunts instead of performs. Real intelligence doesn't shine, it studies, and the moment it reveals itself, the room changes temperature. They spent so much time performing intelligence, they forgot what intelligence actually is. To them, being smart meant sounding smart, using big words, flexing random facts, correcting people just to feel taller. They turned knowledge into a costume, hoping nobody would notice the rips in the fabric. Meanwhile, you weren't playing that game. You weren't trying to look brilliant. You were too busy becoming dangerous. True intelligence has nothing to prove. It watches, it gathers, it maps every crack in the wall. While they flaunted what they thought they knew, you were building a full psychological library, tracking patterns, decoding motives, identifying the quiet parts of their personality they tried to hide. Every time they corrected you, you weren't embarrassed. You were analyzing the insecurity that made them speak. Every time they explained something poorly, you didn't miss the point. You noted how little they actually understood. Smart isn't loud. Smart is accurate. You didn't need applause. You needed access. And pretending to not know was the easiest key you ever stole. The smartest person in any room is rarely the one with their chest out. It's the one asking questions, not to get answers, but to scan the person answering. It's the one who notices tone shifts, hesitation, contradictions. It's the one who spots tension before anyone else realizes it's there. That was you. You weren't seeking knowledge. You were seeking truth. Imagine someone bragging they're a master chess player while you're memorizing every opening they use, every position that makes them sweat. They thought you were learning the game. You were learning them. True intelligence isn't the spotlight. It's the hand that controls the lights. Number 10. The art of playing weak to strike strong. Sometimes the sharpest blade is the one pretending to be dull. You didn't just fake incompetence, you engineered it. Most people can't even act humble without their ego leaking. But you built an entire persona out of strategically placed stumbles, perfectly timed hesitations, questions that sounded clueless but were actually psychological bait. Strategic incompetence is what amateurs call it. You turned it into a science. You knew exactly when to drop the ball and when to pick it up, like you barely understood how it worked. You controlled their perception with surgical precision. Your timing was everything. Too competent and they'd fear you. Too incompetent and they'd discard you. You walked that razor-thin line like a performer who never misses a step. They saw innocence. They saw confusion. They saw harmless. They never saw the calculations running behind your eyes. They never saw the blueprint forming in your mind. They never saw the predator behind the soft edges you painted on. Imagine performing weakness so convincingly that even your heartbeat stays steady while they brag about their superiority. Imagine pretending to struggle with a task you could complete blindfolded. Imagine speaking two languages, the fool and the genius, and switching between them faster than they can blink. That was your hidden mastery. You didn't dim your light because you lacked strength. You dimmed it because you understood something they never will. Power grows best in the dark. And yes, it was exhausting. Holding back brilliance always is. Listening to people explain things they barely grasped, pretending their half-logic made sense, resisting the urge to correct mistakes so obvious they burned. It took discipline most minds don't have, but you endured it because you were playing the long game. Every eye roll they gave you, you stored it. Every condescending tone, noted. Every lie, logged like evidence in a case file only you knew existed. You built networks within networks, some allies who saw your real mind, others who only saw the mask. And the beauty is, both groups played their part perfectly. You designed the ecosystem, you controlled the information flow, you dictated what version of yourself each person interacted with. That's not incompetence, that's high-level strategy disguised as simplicity. The moment they feel safe is the moment they lose. And you knew that, so you gave them safety like candy. You fed their egos until they got comfortable, sloppy, predictable. You let them rest in the illusion that they were superior. Then one day, without drama or warning, you dropped the act and showed them exactly who they'd been trusting, mocking, and underestimating. Strategic incompetence wasn't a mask. It was the weapon they handed you themselves. Number 11. The slow unmasking that broke their reality. Revelation hits harder when it arrives in fragments, because every fragment destroys a lie. You didn't flip the table, you let it collapse on its own. You revealed yourself the way a storm creeps over a horizon, quiet at first, then undeniable, then terrifying. One sharp answer here, one flawless decision there, one insight that cut deeper than anyone expected. You didn't expose your brilliance all at once. You dripped it into the room like a toxin, letting their denial rot inch by inch. They kept trying to convince themselves it was a fluke, a coincidence, a lucky guess. But denial can only survive so long when the truth keeps walking in wearing steel boots. Imagine a magician's assistant stepping forward and performing a trick the magician himself can't explain. That's what you became. A casual comment from you had the power to silence entire meetings. A single correction from you left them blinking like they'd been slapped. You weren't rising, you were simply removing the mask, one card at a time, until they had no story left to hide behind. Their hierarchy. It was never a hierarchy, it was sand, and you were the tide that stopped pretending to be gentle. Now look at them. Anxiety in their eyes, anger in their voices, desperation in their fake compliments. They're not seeking you, they're seeking proximity to your power. They're not respecting you, they're negotiating with their fear. The funniest part? You predicted this reaction long before it happened. You knew the moment the fool became the genius, every coward would start switching roles. Real power doesn't perform. It stalks. Yours grew in silence, took shape in shadow, and struck when the world was busy laughing at you. You weren't building blocks. You were building an empire they were too arrogant to see taking shape right in front of them. Number 12. The doors they can't unopen. Once a mind outgrows its cage, the cage becomes a museum exhibit. Now they finally see you, and the realization burns them from the inside out, because vision without timing is useless, and their timing is tragic. They can't unspill the secrets they dumped in front of you. They can't rebuild the walls they let crumble. They can't guard the corridors you've already memorized. You're not standing at their gates asking for entry. You built tunnels, passageways, entire underground networks beneath every barrier they thought was solid. They believed you wanted a seat at their precious table. Cute. You own the room their table sits in. Freedom hits different when you've been pretending to be trapped. You can feel your mind stretching, unclenching, expanding like it's been waiting years to finally breathe. You speak without shrinking. You think without dimming. You walk without apologizing for the sound of your footsteps. The mask didn't protect you, it protected them. Now that it's gone, your full height blocks their sun. And look at the shift. Those who once mocked you now weigh every syllable like it might explode. Those who dismissed you suddenly insist you're part of the team. Their laughs come out thin, shaky, the sound of people unsure if they're the punchline. They haven't changed their hearts, just their survival strategy. But here's the truth they choke on. You didn't transform. You didn't upgrade. You didn't finally get it together. You were always this sharp, this dangerous, this aware. The only difference is you stopped cushioning your brilliance so their insecurities wouldn't break. You didn't gain power. You unveiled it. You didn't grow into intelligence. You stopped hiding the parts of yourself they couldn't handle. You're free now, not because they accept you, but because you don't need them. You slip through their structures like you wrote the blueprint. And the best part, they think they're adapting to the new you, but they're just meeting the real one for the first time. Number 13, the fear that crawls after the truth hits. Paranoia is what happens when people realize the quiet one was recording the whole movie. Now the room feels different, doesn't it? You can practically taste their anxiety in the air. They're replaying every conversation they ever had around you, wondering what you caught, what you decoded, what you stored away. They finally understand you weren't just hearing them, you were understanding them. Their stupidity, their brittle egos, their borrowed superiority, all exposed under the spotlight of your silence. And the panic? Delicious. Some of them will start testing you now, poking around your limits like children tapping a cage they suddenly realize isn't locked. Let them. Every test is more data. Every challenge is another blueprint of their psychology. They don't know it yet, but they're teaching you how to dismantle them more efficiently. You aren't in their game anymore. You're not even on their board. They're NPCs in a world you've been building in the shadows. They move, and you watch the code behind the movement. They talk, and you hear the fear under the tone. They strategize, and you see the holes before they finish the first sentence. They don't understand that once a mind like yours wakes up publicly, it never goes back to sleep. The few truly intelligent ones, the rare ones, see what happened, and they're the only ones worth noticing now. They understand the scale of it. They understand that if you hid this much intelligence, then there's an ocean beneath the surface they'll never touch. They see the implications and step carefully, not out of fear, but respect. They know the difference between power and performance. They know you didn't evolve. You unveiled. And this isn't an ending. This is where the real game begins. Now that they know you're sharp, they'll switch strategies. They'll try debates, subtle traps, little mind games to see how far you can go. They'll throw bait disguised as challenges, hoping you'll slip. They don't realize you've been preparing for this long before they even acknowledged your existence. You lived in silence. You trained in observation. You sharpened yourself on their arrogance. Let them come. Let them try every trick they know. You've already mapped their patterns, predicted their moves, and identified their panic points. This world they think they control. You've been studying it since the first day they underestimated you. The paranoia they feel now is permanent, and you're only getting started. And the final truth is simple. This was never about payback. It was about stepping into the position that was always yours. Now you move in full daylight with the intelligence you once hid in the dark. You've shifted from pretending to leading, from surviving to rewriting the rules. And the wildest part? They still haven't seen even half of what you're capable of. You exist outside their categories now, operating in a range they'll never reach. This is your transition into dominance, not disguise. If this hit, like the video, subscribe, drop 777 in the comments, and share it with someone who's been underestimated.